Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Life with Loverly podcast. Today's episode is a fun one because I'm inviting my friend and podcast photographer, Liz McShane. Beyond photography, Liz is the owner of the digital marketing agency On Trend Creative Studio. Liz is a wife, mom, and entrepreneur who left her nursing career after 6 years to pursue a dream of owning her own business. What I love about this conversation today is that we chat about how she made decisions along the way on her own personal journey to create a life and business she loves, and how you can do the same. I see a lot of women, myself included, getting stuck in the weeds of the never-ending mountain of decisions we have to make in a day. From business to parenting to friendships, but Liz continues to innovate her business while also being present with her family. And a lot of that comes down to how well and how quickly we can make decisions. So if you aren't exactly sure what you're passionate about, or maybe you're trying to figure out how to turn a hobby into a passion, Liz is here as the friend and guide we all need. Here's my conversation with Liz McShane. Hi, friends. Welcome back to this episode of the Life with Loverly podcast. I am really excited about today's episode. I have one of my friends, Liz McShane, here. Hey, Liz.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to just dive in a little bit more and talk about your entrepreneurial background and kind of hear your story. Before we get into it, though, Liz and I go way back. We literally grew up in church together. I think that's the first time we met in Prince Avenue Church.
Yeah, I think I remember you in middle school.
Yeah.
Did you cheer?
I did.
I feel like I remember
cheer. That. So you're a year older than me.
Right.
And your younger sister was good friends with Jared and John, and obviously they're married now. So, but I went to Prince Avenue, and then, we all just kind of had friends in the same circle. Yeah. But you guys moved away after college and moved to Boston, right?
Mm-hmm. We did, which is where Chris is from, right?
I know.
Because we've talked about that.
Once we connected that back, I was like, whoa, this is wild. Okay, what was it like living in Boston?
It was really cold.
Yeah.
We lived in the city.
Yeah.
And we had our first baby up there. So it was an experience.
What took y'all to Boston?
Patrick's job.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He worked at a bank. I actually got to work at one of the largest it's a Harvard teaching hospital, one of the largest hospitals in the country.
Gosh.
Saw some crazy things.
I can imagine.
It was great for my resume, which obviously I'm not using that anymore, but it was good. So I learned a lot. So it was good.
That's so exciting. Okay, so you currently own On Trend Creative Studio here in Athens, but life hasn't always looked like that for you. I know you just mentioned that you worked in the teaching hospital, but you were a labor and delivery nurse. Go into a little bit more about that. And then I know you kind of shifted from being a nurse to a full-time mom. What was kind of that work-life balance for you like?
So before we had kids, I was all in on nursing.
Yeah.
To rewind a little bit, when I was in undergrad, I went to school to get a child and family development degree. I wanted that MRS degree. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get married, have babies. And then after I graduated, I felt like I wanted something more. So I went back to school. I got a master's degree in nursing. I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
Did that for 6 years. I loved it. But when we started having babies, I was like, I want to be a mom. I want to be a stay-at-home mom. So I hung up the cleats for a little bit. Never intended on hanging them up for good.
Yeah.
Was always planning on going back. But after we had our second baby, I remember leaving my family on Thanksgiving to go to the hospital and thinking, this is so hard. This is just not for me. I kind of want to take a risk and see what it's like just to stay at home. So I was home for a little while, and that itch came back. I was like, I've got to do something.
I know.
So that's when I picked up my first used camera, taught myself how to take pictures, which now is more like a hobby because I can, I've streamlined it. It's fun. Everything is pretty much, I know what to expect almost in any situation, I feel like. So it's more of a hobby.
Yeah.
Maybe I should say it's a little less challenging now. So it's just fun. But then that led me to digital marketing, which I'm all in on now.
Yeah.
So
which is amazing timing getting in when you did.
Yeah.
So, okay, after y'all were in Boston, you had your first daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your oldest is a girl. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then you did y'all move back here and then you had your second? Okay. So, and you've got like family here. And where's Patrick's family live?
Rome, Georgia.
Okay. So they're all here. I can only imagine like those leaving on holidays and it just is like, wait a second, this is not the memories I was like hoping to create.
Exactly. Yeah. It was tough. And I tell people all the time, my path to entrepreneurship to where I am now was so crooked, but it was still my path. Yeah. And so every piece of the puzzle I say is like a stepping stone, and it just wasn't straight for me.
Right.
But without all of the decisions I made leading up to where I'm at now, I would never be here.
Right.
So honestly, being a nurse it's created a lot of connections for me. I still see patients like in Target.
Yeah.
They'll be like, "You delivered my baby." And I'm like,
"Hi.
I don't remember you, but great." So it really allowed me to meet a lot of people, but also how to deal with people in really stressful situations.
Yeah.
There's never been a social media emergency. Maybe for you,
right.
there has been, but like,
right.
to my knowledge, there really has never been an emergency in this industry. So I've learned to cope with stressful situations a lot better. And then just like I said, dealing with people, conversing with different types of people. I mean, that's something I had to do as a nurse. So a lot of those skills are transferable to what I'm doing now. A lot of them aren't, but at the same time, I think it also gave me a lot of confidence. You know, I proved to myself, I can do this, and then I can go do something more and different. So I don't think people need to put themselves in a box and say, you know, this is what I have to do forever. You can pivot and go do something different if you feel like that's what your heart is telling you to do. So
yeah, I love that. So I think we've got something in common. Like we love being moms, but we also love working. I feel like you are one of the hardest working moms I've seen in a while, just because of us working together, knowing like the photo studio. Obviously, you've shot a lot of our behind the scenes stuff that we do here at Loverly Gray. So I feel like I've gotten to see that like working side of you a little bit more. But tell me about some of the struggles you've experienced after leaving, and then like just even like as an entrepreneur mom, it's different than being a stay-at-home mom, and just it has its own challenges because you're trying to grow and run a business, but you also have like such a passion for your kids.
Right. Going back to just the stay-at-home mom phase, that was honestly one of the most difficult things I've ever done, because I like to feel like I'm contributing financially. And I also need a creative outlet. Yeah. And so as much as I loved being the stay-at-home mom, I just still felt like I wasn't living up to my fullest potential. Yeah. So kind of like what you said, I think what gets me out of bed in the morning is working hard. I tell people all the time, I mean, God gave us certain gifts. He made us certain ways. He made animals certain ways. So I like to compare myself to a golden retriever chasing a tennis ball. Literally, that's me with work. Like I wake up and I'm ready to go. And there are some people who, they're the bulldog. They want to like just chill all day. And that's just not me. So I think honing into how God made me and then figuring out, okay, now that I understand how I'm wired, how do I use those gifts to bring him joy? Because ultimately, I think what brings God joy is seeing us use the gifts and the talents that he gave us. So I think that's kind of where I'm at in my life now.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing wrong with whatever path anybody chooses. It's just as long as you're living out and like your God-given talents.
Exactly.
And really like pouring into those. I mean, I think that's just like what makes humanity. Everybody's doing what they feel like they were meant to do. Okay, so you talked about creative outlet. Like I hear from a lot of people, especially moms, they aren't really sure like how to be creative or like what they're passionate about. Because I mean, even just like think of working and then being a mom and being in these phases of just like newborn and like all these phases of life, but then you want to like get out of that and get back into like, what are you passionate about? And it feels like you don't have time to figure that out. How did you figure out you had an underlying passion for photography, or was it just something you always had? And is there any advice you could give to somebody maybe in a similar position?
Yeah. I think I've always had a creative side. I think it was a little not frowned upon, but like a little risky to not go get your undergraduate degree in this and then just check the boxes. And so I was always just checking the boxes. And then ultimately I just got to a place where I was so unfulfilled that I really needed to introspectively look at myself and say, okay, who am I? Why am I this way? What do I not know about myself? And I actually took, as simple as it sounds, the Enneagram.
Yeah.
Which
Love it.
I then listened to, what's it called? It's a podcast. It's a Christian podcast. I'll have to go look it up. It's called the Enneagram Summer.
Okay.
Anyway, it just kind of talks about how intertwined spirituality and the Enneagram really is, and how God made us a certain way. And when I really looked at it from that perspective, everything clicked for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is why I feel this way. This is why I want to do these things. So I think understanding yourself, it's something I tell the girls that work for me all the time, is get to know yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds silly, but when you understand what drives you and how God made you, because he doesn't give us a blueprint for, like, we're not all the same.
Right.
So you have to actually put in the work to understand yourself. And then you can really apply what you've learned to your life and start making decisions based on what you've learned. So
yeah. I love the Enneagram. I feel like anytime I've ever done reading on it, or just, I feel so validated. I'm like,
exactly.
that is me, you know? Like,
Are you a 3?
I would, yes. Are you?
How did I guess?
I know.
2, 3.
Okay, really? Helper. I love that.
I think I flip kind of back and forth
Okay.
between the two, but yeah.
I go 3 wing 2, which I feel like those are very common wings.
Right.
But it's just, I kind of appreciate also having like a little bit of a guide. I read this Bible study, or it was like a devotional book once, and it was like the Enneagram 3 and the Bible, or maybe it wasn't in the Bible, but it was something about like devotions related to being an Enneagram 3. And so many of them, I was just like, wow, like I just feel like now I know the path. You know, I mean,
that's
not
exactly
that I did it
how
before,
I felt.
but
I think the word validation is, because you don't even know what you need to feel validated for, but then suddenly you do, and you're like, oh, it all just clicks.
Yeah.
So I actually tell, my team to take it, and I send them the podcast. It's by Annie Downs. I just remembered it. But, because it really helps to learn about yourself. And I think ultimately, sounds silly, I'm 36 years old, but I'm just now getting to the point in my life where I understand what drives me.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting too, because I feel like people who are wanting to maybe find what their purpose is or figure this out, sometimes it just feels like our society has made it be like, well, you need to figure it out right now or you're going to get left behind. And we've kind of adopted the process of just like, let's slow down to speed up, and like really kind of normalizing that. Like if we don't figure this out, then we're not going to be good at it in the future. So just kind of this question about like, for people who might feel like they're in this position, or they just feel like there's something more, don't make it harder than it has to be, but just like you said, like get to know yourself. And I think some of those answers will come. It's very interesting being a woman. All the things that goes on. Anyway, okay, so did you ever experience imposter syndrome when you first started out as a photographer?
I still do.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, still do. Definitely did in the beginning. I think one way to combat that was I wasn't even charging for sessions in the beginning. So I was like, well, if they suck, it's fine. You didn't pay me any money, Right. So, but still to this day, I think, gosh, I bet people are looking at me and thinking, who does she think she is? What does she think she's doing?
Yeah.
One thing though, and it's funny because I really do try to talk to myself like I would talk to a friend. So if I'm thinking these things about myself, I say, okay, Liz, what would you say to so-and-so if they said this? And one thing I always have to remind myself of is, have you heard of the spotlight phenomenon? So people generally, pretty much everyone is self-centered, and that's just how God created us. We always think people are looking at us, losing sleep over what we did, what we said, what we posted on social media. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Nobody loses sleep overnight because I posted a story that was just dumb. Like nobody cares, really.
Right.
And so when you can adopt that mindset that the spotlight is not on me, spotlight is on everyone's selves, then you can really do a lot more with your life.
Yeah.
So having to get over that has been a challenge, but I'm actively working on it every day. But to answer your question, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's just one way I kind of combat that.
I love that, because the people pleaser in me definitely struggles with like, oh, well, they're probably still thinking about that. And it's like, no, like you're just thinking about that when it's really like a mindset shift and something I know I'm constantly working on. But I'm going to look more into the spotlight syndrome. That sounds like it could be very beneficial
it's a real
for
thing.
me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Okay. So obviously you're a very successful photographer now. Do you have any, like some photo shoot that made you think like, yes, I am living out my purpose and my passion? Like, is there one time or is there a series of times that you're like, okay, this is it?
Well, the word purpose, I feel like I do need to explain this. The name of my photography business is actually Repurposed. And I've actually never explained why I named it that. I had like an epiphany one day when I was starting this business. And because I was going from like nurse to photographer, ultimately what I wanted to do was almost have like a blog and tell people stories. And I wanted to be repurposed. And so that's kind of where the name came from. But what I've learned is my favorite sessions are the ones where a family might be going through a tragic situation. I'll give you an example. There was a little 4-year-old girl, and I have a 5-year-old, and she was leaning over a candle and caught her hair on fire, and it burned, 3rd-degree burns on her head. She lost a lot of her hair, and the mom was so strong and so sweet. She actually wanted to capture her daughter in that phase because her daughter was so strong through it all, and she wanted to remember her daughter like that. And I was like, I have to do a session for you.
Yeah.
And so I got to style them and take them out and do a family session for them. And she sent me the nicest letter. And it was just like right then I was like, I am living out my dream. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. But then obviously photographing births. I don't do weddings, but I mean, your house, like, events like that are just once in a lifetime. The fact that I'm there to capture what's literally going to be your memories is it's the best thing ever. It really is.
And I mean, just from somebody who's been on the receiving side of that, like, I know you just did this for me this weekend, and I've already looked back over the photos, and I feel like I'm like remembering my emotions, like as I'm like walking around like this, or like you caught me being like the first look into the room, which I would have never seen that of me, to remember like just the gratitude that I was feeling. Photographers are just the most special people to me. I mean, obviously I'm in this industry where I do a lot of photos and there's pictures and all sorts of things, but having people who like really care about that and who care about that for their clients is so important. It's such like an amazing trait.
Yeah. The heirloom pictures of the kids is like, that's one of my favorites because you think you're going to remember what your kids look like at a certain age, but you really don't.
Yeah.
I know that sounds bad, but like you really need to document it. And so those are some of my favorites because you can just kind of watch them grow throughout the years, and it's so sweet.
And you do those at your house, right?
But I can do them anywhere. Yeah, I just got a mobile setup, so yeah.
Okay, that's great to know.
Yeah, it's
bookmarking
fun.
that
It's fun.
information.
It's fun.
Okay, so as clients keep coming, do you find it harder to have like a work-life balance?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I will say, and it might have been Chris, your husband, that said this. I kind of do everything I'm doing like 100%. So when I'm on at work, it is 1,000 miles an hour. Same with being a mom. I mean, this weekend, I really didn't pick up my phone. I mean, Patrick was out of town. I mean, and we just had fun. We went outside. So I think just trying to be mindful of giving 100% to whatever I'm doing in the moment, because if I'm sitting there and trying to work and trying to play with the kids at the same time, both things are suffering.
Yeah.
So
I feel like once I learned that I needed like a day of rest, like we take off Sundays, everybody here, nobody is like posting or doing anything. I don't do any social media or anything on Sundays. And that has been just such like a breath of fresh air for my family, to have a day that like is dedicated to like whatever you want to do. I'm not worried about like, hold on, like I know we're running out the door for church, but like I'm finishing this reel.
Right.
And
I've definitely been there. I've done that. But
I think you have to kind of like suffer through those times of like, okay, this isn't really serving me for work or for family. And then you realize, okay, it's hard because you have to go through
get
those
there. Exactly.
to be like, okay, this isn't right. I agree. And I think if people who look at it like, if you're giving 100% to this, and then you can stop and give 100% to this. Obviously, it doesn't always work like that, but
Exactly.
like you have to find balance.
Yeah, I was about to say, very rarely does it ever perfectly balance. I mean, we try our best, but if you're at least mindful of it and you try to set up those boundaries and perimeters, then more than likely, you're not going to suffer.
Right.
So.
Okay, so once demand continued to grow, this is when On Trend Creative came about. Tell me just like about the gap in the market that you saw. I would love for you to tell us about just On Trend Creative overall. I know before we got started in this conversation, I was like, I think this person could benefit from your services. So I would love to just hear everything On Trend Creative.
Yeah. So photography, I was working with businesses. And then I remembered the actual business I was at, and I said, you should start letting me come back every month to do just like monthly photo shoots for you so you can use it on social media, because that's where I feel like you should probably be marketing your services. And so we started to do that, and I didn't see any of the photos on their social. They weren't even posting on social. And I asked them about it. I said, is there a reason? Is it the pictures? And they said, we just don't have time. And so that's literally when On Trend was born. I said, okay, well, there needs to be somebody that can take this off your plate, not only create the content, but post it for you, caption it, hashtag, do all the research, the strategy. I didn't even know this was a thing. Now there's several agencies doing the same thing we are. We've bootstrapped this whole thing.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me last week, have you learned this from like a course, or did you go to a seminar? And I said, I haven't had time to take a course or go to a seminar. These are strategies we've learned and that are specifically focused on businesses and how they can market their product or services. So working with an influencer like you, obviously you don't need our help, but you have more of a niche market and a niche style. And this is more for, we work with a lot of med spas or vet clinics or just doctor's offices, you name it. We can pretty much help with them because ultimately, they need a presence on social media.
Right.
I mean, how many times do we really go look at a website anymore?
No.
I mean, sometimes, but
You're
usually
mostly like opening up Instagram and being
to go see,
what are they doing there?
Exactly. So
that's like their validation or like their credibility is like what their
and
social presence is.
if they don't have a social presence, you're like, is this legit?
Right.
So that's kind of where we come in, and we can work with anybody anywhere. So when I first started this business, I hired a few undergrads at UGA who are still with me today. 2 years later, they're graduated, moved off to different parts of the country, and they're still working for me. But
awesome.
we were just servicing Athens clients, people that I knew. And now, I mean, we have clients all over the United States, which is crazy. We have a team of 12.
Wow.
Our office is right across the street from you, which is convenient because I use the studio all the time. But yeah, it's just been crazy, and it's been so fun to scale it. And I've learned kind of back to what I was saying in the beginning of our conversation, how photography is more of just like a hobby. It really is now. It's like a creative outlet. Sometimes when I'm editing, or I get into this flow state and I'm like, this is so fun. Like, this is really just so fun. It doesn't feel like a job. On Trend is more of a job. I'm managing people, dealing with different client issues. And so it's probably a little more stressful, but it's scalable. It's really been honestly a dream come true.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So I know you've had a lot of like just big pivots in your life, from going to nursing, moving back to Athens, picking up a camera, starting On Trend Creative. Tell me your thought process around making a big decision.
So I can't take credit for this. Actually, before I went to nursing school, I read this book, and I still utilize these 4 questions today.
Okay.
It actually helped me make the decision to go to nursing school, because you have to think, at the time I had just graduated. Do I really want to go back to school, take on that financial stress, go back into debt to get a master's degree in nursing? So I read this book by Ben Carson, who he was a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, pediatric neurosurgeon. So imagine the stress of that job.
Seriously.
But he wrote a book, and the name of it is Take the Risk. And he has what he calls a best, worst analysis. So it's 4 questions that you ask yourself when you're facing a big decision. And it's really simple. And I've literally remembered this one part of the book for the last 10 years. And it is, what is the best thing that can happen if you take the risk? What is the worst thing that can happen if you take the risk? What is the best thing that can happen if you don't take the risk? And what is the worst thing that can happen if you don't take the risk? I can't tell you how many times I've written that out on paper. you also need to be doing that for people that are close to you in your life. So like for you, you would want to also ask those questions in regards to Chris and your children. And so asking myself those questions has pretty much always ended up with me taking the risk.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying to go make, an uncalculated risk decision, but for the most part, I think, the only thing we're really guaranteed in life is that we're all going to die, not to get morbid on us, but like we are. And so when I really started thinking about my life in that way, I was like, what do I have to lose at this point? Like if I have a desire or God has laid something on my heart, I'm going to go for it. And I still live by that mentality. And I honestly think that's why On Trend is here, because I just kept trusting that and kept taking the risk. So
that's awesome.
That's kind of what I use.
That's probably like the nuggets that you guys need to pay attention to when you're listening to this episode, because I feel like those 4 questions alone can help so many people just with any decision that they're making.
I mean, he used it when he was deciding whether or not to separate conjoined twins, and I'm over here using it to decide whether or not I should go back to nursing school. So it can really be used in any situation. That's what I love about it, is it's so simple and so applicable to anyone. So
I love that. That's a great little nugget. What would you say is your favorite part about owning a business, and what's the hardest part?
My favorite part is probably the camaraderie of the team. That is my favorite part. I just love being able to pour into, I call them girls. They're young women. They're a lot younger than I am, but I just love being a part of their lives. We do something called On Trend development meetings, where I get to spend time with them once a month talking about everything except for On Trend. So how can I pour into them and help them develop as young women and entrepreneurs outside of, their job, if that makes sense. I don't want everything that we talk about to always be related to just on trend. So that's something I'm really passionate about and what I love about the business I'm in. And with photography, it's just a one person show. So I don't really get that part of it. So
What would you say is the hardest part about owning a business?
Making the big decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, we make it sound simple when we break it down into 4 questions, but I really struggle with, and I'm working on it. I've finally hired a business coach, and that has been the best thing for me. But trusting myself and the confidence to make the big decisions is something I've almost always needed, like a sounding board, because I think I have a lot of insecurities in making the wrong decision. But I'm getting better at it. But that's the hardest thing for me, is making the executive decisions.
Well, because I mean, like, there's a lot of things riding on that, I mean, you have like employees, and you're not just making a decision for yourself, it's for everybody who's part of the brand. So I definitely can relate to that.
A lot of it's experience too. I mean, I think one thing I'm starting to realize is same situations always kind of resurface, maybe within different people or in just different scenarios, but it's the same situation. And so once you deal with it once, it's like, okay, now I know how to deal with that, because it's going to happen again.
Right.
So I'm just kind of like building my toolbox.
Right.
And it does get easier, but that's always been something that's been really difficult.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you've got some really great tools to continue to be successful. So while the hard things can be hard, the great things about being an entrepreneur are really great.
They outweigh it for sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's get a little tangible here. Photography and social media management are service offerings of On Trend. Can you give us your number 1 tip to show up on socials, and your number 1 tip for anyone with an upcoming photography shoot?
First of all, I can't believe you're asking me this question. So what I tell our clients is, have you heard of the KISS method?
I don't think so.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Okay.
Keep it simple. I mean, honestly, I think people try to overcomplicate it, and it just gets so messy. And I'm like, just who cares if this is off a little bit? Just go with it. Just be you. And kind of back to the spotlight syndrome. I think if people can get over that. So if I'm talking to a client, the hardest thing to get a client to do is to take a video of themselves or be on camera. I don't think you struggle with that, but a lot of people really do. And that's the hardest thing, is to teach them, hey, like, this person who follows you, who you've never met, isn't going to lose sleep over the video you just posted. So
they're probably going to love it.
Exactly. They're going to be jealous because they don't have the confidence to do that. So Those are probably the two biggest things that I give our clients.
Okay.
So.
And then if a photographer is maybe a new photographer has an upcoming shoot, what would you like? What's your one piece of advice for
a
them?
new photographer?
Yeah.
You just have to throw yourself out there. I work with a lot of new photographers, and I actually send them my calendar and say, you can come to any session you want, and you can go practice hands-on manual photography with no pressure. Don't charge people if that's what it takes.
Right.
To get out there and to learn. So that's kind of what I tell them.
I love the instilling the confidence, because with so many things, you just have to try it.
Yeah.
But even trying it is can be scary.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to reach out to other photographers and say, can I just learn from you?
Yeah. I feel like I know you learned a lot. Like you took one of Naomi's classes, which is the circle of connections in the creative space is just so small. But then you've also done some really cool projects and shoots with other photographers and have taught people. And didn't you guys go to Alaska or?
You're probably thinking of Aspen.
Aspen.
Yeah,
okay.
That was crazy.
Yeah. What was that for? Just
a client wanted family photos, and of course I'm going to
Sure.
say yes. I'm going to figure out how to get out there. And so we did. And it was, photography has taken me to some amazing places. We go down to 30A, and while we're there, I'll offer up 2 to 3 beach sessions. And that also gives me a creative outlet because I'm able to shoot in an area that I don't normally shoot in. So it's so fun. I learned just last week that you don't shoot in winds over, I think it was 10 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour. It was horrible.
Yeah.
This poor family. It was so windy, but I was I don't know how I was supposed to know that.
Right.
So,
we were down there right after y'all. It's actually funny. I saw Anna at Chick-fil-A on the way.
She said, Brittany just said she was texting you. I was like, yeah, we were talking. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but I was like, yeah, we were just talking. So weird.
But yeah, the winds were crazy. I always think of Heather, who's a photographer that lives down there. And I'm it's she always knows the perfect time, but that's her environment, just the perfect times to shoot other places. You just kind of get used to that. But I'm sure it's sharpening your swords when you're in a different environment. You can try something new and shoot somewhere else, which is kind of fun.
Back to the whole, I think, premise of this conversation is I think that back to being a nurse, I understand that the literal worst thing that can happen is I just really just don't deliver. Yeah. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to die, hopefully. Right. But ultimately, because of these photos, there's not going to be an emergency. So I think when you can just kind of not stress so much about it and just throw yourself out there.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I've had times where I'm overcomplicating a brand collaboration. And I'm well, should I try this new thing or, should I talk? Should I not? And then I have to be okay, what got me here? Do that.
Exactly.
Just keep it back to the basics. Yep. Keep it simple. I'm going to start using the KISS.
Keep it simple. I'll have to send you. It was by a marine. There's a whole lot more to it than that. But I've always just said, let's just keep it simple.
Okay. Okay. One last question for you. And this is one that you will hear over and over this season on the podcast. What was the most meaningful act of kindness someone has extended to you that had a lasting impact on your life?
That is such a big question because there are so many. There's so many. The one that just for whatever reason sticks out is when I did want to go back to nursing school. It was so expensive. Getting a master's degree was thousands and thousands of dollars. I couldn't afford it. Yeah. And someone, and I still don't know who it was, completely covered it for me.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And had they not done that, I would not have gone to nursing school. Had I not gone to nursing school, I wouldn't have done photography. Had I not done photography, I wouldn't be doing on-trend. So it's amazing. Back to the stepping stones. I don't look at that as a waste because had I not done that, I wouldn't be doing this. So I think that was shocking. And just whoever did that, thank you, because I wouldn't be doing what I love.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. I love that. Okay. Where can everybody find you?
The best place is probably Instagram, On Trend Creative Studio, and we're pretty active over there, so come say hey.
All right, Liz. Well, thank you again so much. And friends, until next time.